Hi everyone, this is Knowledge Topper, and in this particular video we try to briefly discuss and understand the key differences between finance and lease. If you didn't subscribe our channel Knowledge Topper yet, please do subscribe our channel Knowledge Topper, as well as like our Facebook page and do join our Facebook group as well. You will find a lot of good material related to these topics as well as from other courses and topics as well. So let's get into this video. First of all, we will look at the definition of both our terms, finance and lease. Then we will look at our further key main differences between finance and lease. So if we talk about from the perspective of finance, financing is an option where a buyer chooses to buy a product and prefers to pay for the same on a monthly, quarterly or half yearly basis instead of paying the total amount all at once. And if we talk about from the perspective of lease, a lease is an option where a leasing company chooses to purchase an asset on behalf of a customer. Okay, so this is our first difference. Now if we talk about our second difference, which is of depreciation, like the basis for comparison is depreciation. And if we talk about from the perspective of finance, in a financing system the hirer is eligible for claiming the depreciation. And on the other hand, if we talk about depreciation from the perspective of lease, in a leasing mechanism the lessor is eligible for claiming the depreciation. If we talk about our third basis for comparison, which is the examples of financing, these are the most common examples using worldwide. If we talk about from the perspective of finance, that what are those examples? Like there are personal cars, there are mobile phones, land, house, furnitures, other electronic items. These all are few examples that offer financing option to the buyers worldwide. Now if we talk about the examples from the perspective of lease, like commercial properties, computers, technological items, etc., and so on, are one of the finest examples that offer leasing options to the leasing entities worldwide. Now if we talk about the duration from the perspective from the perspective of finance, in finance the duration of financing option is quite shorter as compared to the leasing option, because a financing option may last for 3 years and to a maximum of 5 years. Now if we talk about from the perspective of lease, the duration of leasing option is quite longer as compared to the financing option, because a leasing option of borrowing might last for 10 years to a maximum of 15 or even more years. Okay, now if we talk about our fifth example, which is our expenditure which type of expenditure both belongs to finance and lease. Like in finance, financing option is a type of capital expenditure, and on the other hand, if we talk about leasing option is a type of operating expense. Now if we talk about our sixth difference, which is down payment, in financing option may or may not require the buyer to make down payments. The minimum amount of down payment that must be made depends entirely on the seller of the asset. Remember that it depends entirely on the seller of the asset, and the compulsion to make or not make down payment to depend on the seller of the asset. On the other hand, if we talk about from the perspective of lease, like in leasing option does not require the leasing firm to make any sort of down payment. If we talk about our seventh seventh basis for comparison, which is of ownership, in a financing option, the buyer or the customer, whichever is vested with the ownership of the asset. In other words, the buyer is the owner of the asset. And if we talk about from the perspective of lease, in a leasing option, the leasing company or the dealer is vested with the ownership of the asset. In other words, leasing entity or the dealer is the owner of the asset. And if we talk about our second last basis for comparison for differences, which is of expensive, whichever is expensive. In financing option, the monthly payment turns out to be more expensive as compared to the leasing option, because this is surely the fact that in a financing option, buyer pays for the total cost of an asset. And if we talk about from the perspective of lease, in a leasing option, monthly payment does not turn out to be that expensive as compared to the financing option, because this is surely to the fact that in a leasing option, leasing entity is only required to pay for that part of the asset that is actually going to get used up. And this is our last and most important basis for comparison, which is buying option. In a financing option, a buyer, remember, a buyer is provided the buying option with respect to a particular asset once he or she makes the required payment for the same. And if you talk about from the perspective of lease, in a leasing option, a leasing company or a lessee is not vested with the buying option, as he is only required to make rental payments against the use of asset during the lease period. However, the leasing company is provided with the option of purchasing the asset during the completion of lease period. So this is the difference for you guys. If you like this video, do subscribe our channel Knowledge Topper, as well as like our Facebook page, and do join our Facebook group as well. You will find a lot of good topics related to these, as well as from other topics as well. So this is it, the video for you guys. If you like this video, thumbs up, and this is it for this video. Thank you so much everyone. It's time to say bye bye.